here are the downsides of gear that nobody talks about. So if you don't know me, I'm Game from BusyWorks Beats.com. We train over 1 million producers around the world. Some have gone to work with Kanye West, Post Malone, Ariana Grande, French Montana, Young Thug, Polo G, Trippie Redd, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Glorilla. Some have won Grammys, some platinum plaques, and a lot of those guys did not use hardware gear. So I think there's a misconception about hardware gear. Does hardware give you a great sound? Sometimes. Can most people afford hardware? No, that's the main problem. And can we achieve the hardware sound in your computer? My answer is I think so, to a degree. Now, nothing can really parallel hardware because of the nature of electronics and electricity. But think about it this way. Anytime something is converted into zeros and ones, it has a pattern to it. So give AI and machine learning enough time, it can find the pattern of zeros to ones. When you guys have, for example, a Moog, for example, and the Moog goes into your system, it's converted from electricity to zeros and ones. When you guys have a microphone, doesn't matter how pristine your recording environment is, it's going through a preamp into your audio interface into the computer, converted into zeros and ones. So we truly don't really hear analog. To be 100% analog, you would have to have a console or print to vinyl, for example, to truly have an analog experience, going from analog to analog. So that would be, for example, us recording it, a project on a console, and then that console records it to tape, or records it through the console to tape. Okay. And then we play it from tape on some kind of tape player thing that plays it over speakers. That would be a fully analog experience. And none of us, for the most part, have experienced that currently. So if we're experiencing music through the digital realm, that means we have enough information. The analog stuff is the training data, we'll say, for the machine. And if the machine has enough analog material, it will find patterns over time. A Moog can't sound that much different every single time. Depending on the phase and everything, it could have different positions, but over time, if you cycle, 100 samples of the same exact note, it's pretty much the same exact thing as the real thing. So give AI enough time, give a company time to figure out how to, do some machine learning on a Moog. Give some company a time, an ambitious company, time to record a bunch of guitars or a bunch of whatever the thing is, even outboard gear. If you guys are not familiar, my voice is gone because I was making a ton of video today and we ran out of water. I don't have any water, so forgive my voice. But there's this thing called NAM profiles. I want you guys to look this up. If you get one thing this holiday season, I recommend you guys get NAM profiles. These things are crazy. If you go to Analog XAI, I'm going to show you guys the website here in a second. As you guys know, there's gearheads out there who claim that software is like the downfall, I'm exaggerating, of music production. But for me, if you come to this website is killer. I mean, killer. These guys know what they're doing. They are essentially, there's a website you can go to. I think it's called Tone Zone or something like that. They give you a sine sweep and you send that sine sweep through your analog gear. It records it into Tone Zone and gives you back a profile. And that profile is embedded into plugins. So you're basically capturing that specific moment in time of your hardware. And some hardware is non-linear and some hardware acts different, but you can actually run the sine wave through different scenarios. So it's not like capture one point of the 1176. So without me even talking about it, let's just actually hear what this sounds like. So on the website, analogx.ai, they've added this new processor where you guys can hear the samples in real time. So for example, we could run this on, let's do some drums for now. And we have the 1176, we have the Zulu. Let's run it through a Zulu, for example. Let me turn this down a little bit. Hear that crunch? Let's switch the setting. It's a little bit softer. Now they're pushing the Zulu pretty hard to get that reaction. So the main thing and the only drawdown so far is that the technology is at a place where we can load a preset amount. So for example, it's like taking a picture of a really nice canyon, but only at a specific time of day and no other time of day. So you're only stuck with that specific picture of the canyon. Now the canyon can be 4K, 8K, resolution, but it's only one time of day. So that's where we are currently with this machine learning. But listen to what I'm saying here. Once AI has enough information to basically predict the times of day, then we're cooking when it comes to AI stuff that sounds analog, because all it needs is just training, because in the machine, it's doing the same thing that you guys' interfaces are doing when it does conversion. It's predicting the next waveform. So let's do the Big Green Bomber here. So these guys know their stuff. You know, they get samples from all types of gear that I've never heard of in my entire life. Okay. So I'd recommend you guys shop with Analog X for sure. There's another company called Past the Future Reverbs. They have run their NAMM profiles through things like the MPC, the SP1200, the ASR10. So you can get that knock, that, you know, that signature knock of these machines. Okay. So you don't even need to have an MPC 60 to get the MPC 60 knock. You guys can use this NAMM profile technology. So here's a TIOC, a tape machine. To me, tape machines are the best ones for drums. They just sound so good on drums. And we could turn the processing on and off. So here's before. Here's after. Let's turn it up. Here's before. Here's after. It adds a little more crunch. Let's switch the instrument so you guys can hear this. I think let's do a vocal. If the vocal, hopefully the vocal's not. Okay, here's the vocal. Now you can run compressors too. Now a compressor, it's nuanced in real life. You don't just turn it to one setting. But here's the thing that a lot of people can't comprehend about gear is that real gear with outboard gear, you're rarely touching it. With plugins, you're always touching the settings. But with outboard gear, you barely touch a knob unless you really, really have to change something. You're rarely ever touching it. That's why I got rid of mine. It just became the innovation and the novelty kind of wore off about it because it was just the same thing and the same thing and the same thing over and over and over again. So to me, it was like, do I really need this? And I had the real stuff. I had a whole chain. Okay. Now here's another thing that nobody tells you about gear is that sometimes you get audio dropouts if you don't have the proper gear. Somebody told me I needed a clock. I don't know the exact piece I needed, but I would record out of FL Studio into my analog stuff and the audio would drop out and it would come back into the DAW with like a little part missing. So I was like, what the heck? What's the point of all this if I can't even get a solid recording? So every time you're done your beats and your vocals and everything, you have to print it and you have to wait for the song to actually record in its entirety, which that alone is kind of boring. I mean, it's a small cost, but still it's like, you know, let me pull up a track. I think actually I don't have it on this computer. So let's just use this vocal. And we're going to run this vocal through a compressor. Let's do an 1176 or I thought they had an LA2A. Let's do the LA2A.
And the wind you love so strong. Waking up, we feel so cold. There's some stories left untold. In my heart you live again. Till we meet beyond the pain. Memories that fled in my mind.
The vocal's a little hard to hear because it's not like very active. Let's try some drums just so you guys can really. So here's without the LA 2A. Here's with. Night and day, you guys can hear that, like that groove. Here's before. Here's after. That sounds legit to me. So I recommend you guys check out this website. Again, a lot of gear, especially gear that's like outboard gear, like a compressor or an EQ of some sort or some kind of tape emulation outboard gear. It's like, chances are this company has figured out a way to sample it into their technology and it's extremely affordable. So you guys can get this, you can get started for $40. I think they give you a couple profiles for free, if I'm not mistaken. But even if they don't, you know, their stuff is extremely affordable. So you guys can go through and figure out the stuff you want. The TIOC is a tape machine. Sounds really good. If I'm even saying that right, TIOC. Don't sleep on consoles too, because consoles tend to have a really nice sound. So for example, one of the outboard pieces that we had was the SSL Fusion. So let me pull up the SSL Fusion and just show you guys what it can do to your, let's do maybe some, let's do beat. What is this? Let's see what the beat sounds like. Now the beat is already kind of loud, so it's kind of hard to, oh, that's because it's because I have the slider up. Let's pull that back down. Okay, let's turn it off just to see where the volume's at. All right, so here's without anything. Here's with the processor. So let's add some width to it, for example. Let's add some heavy saturation. Here's before. Here's after. Here's before. So definitely has characteristics of what I liked about the SSL. Now, one thing I haven't heard it do, which I don't even think it can do, is its stereo width technique. I'm not sure how that would even be sampled. So certain things from hardware, might not be sampled, like how sounds separate themselves in certain preamps and certain analog consoles, or even, some stereo width stuff like the MVP or the SSL. So stuff like that, I'm not sure can be sampled. But outside of those small little things, which you could do inside of a plugin, because the SSL Fusion plugin sounds just like the SSL Fusion imager. So if you guys want something, for example, now the piano is already wide, so I'm not going to make it too wide, but the SSL, let me show you guys this plugin. The Fusion Stereo Imager, I used this against the real thing, and I was like, I couldn't tell that much of a difference. So this is one of my, the plugins that is definitely worth it. Not sure if it's on sale, but this is one of the main reasons I even bought the SSL, was just the stereo width module. So that alone, once you have a beat run through there, you could get it pretty wide without doing too much extra work. There's a lot to go through, but I guess the main, talking point, since this is a talking head video, is I think a lot of people are obsessed with gear because you haven't experienced all of what software has to offer, or you're still trying to learn. So for example, I used to buy a lot of UAD plugins because I wanted to learn gear. I wanted to learn what an 1176 was because I never had one around my area. I wanted to learn what this, Fairchild was. I wanted to learn what, what's another just random unit, some kind of Neve unit, some kind of Neve console was. So I went through all the Universal Audio stuff more as like tuition to learn the hardware stuff. And then when I understood, all this outboard gear and analog stuff as to what it actually does and what it is, the difference between digital versus like saturated EQs and different things like that, I was like, oh, okay. Well, now that I know the difference, there's plugins that can do similar, if not better stuff and more precise stuff. When you have hardware, there is a lot more headroom, I've noticed. And even if it's not just headroom, it's just the sonic, like at least with the SSL, instead of just center, left 50%, left 100%, or center, right 50%, right 100%, it was like center, right 10%, right 20%, right 30%. Like you could hear all the in-betweens. It's the same thing I had when I got these headphones, the Odyssey headphones, the MM500s. These things help me see the whole sound stage, whereas my Sennheisers would not let me hear the entire sound stage. It just sounded like left and right. With Odyssey, you hear the entire like band of sound. And because I can actually hear it, I can get that same similar width and detail and sonics inside of headphones. Now, should I be mixing over speakers? Probably, but do I feel like waking up my child? No. Do I feel like waking up my fiance? No. Do I feel like being loud to the neighbors? Not really. So it's like, there's a trade-off. And if I was in a commercial studio where, we had thick cement walls on the outside and I had, rock wool in the wall and hollowed out floors and all that type of stuff, of course we'd crank the volume. But that's just not where I'm working from right now. I moved the studio upstairs because it was just way too dark in that basement. So long story short, I've had a commercial, because here's a lot of the stuff that people with gear say. They say, oh, they never been in the big leagues. They never had outboard gear. I had a commercial studio. You guys saw it in 2020. I showed you guys how to basically record. I showed you guys the vocal booth. It had acoustic treatment everywhere. It had it on the ceiling. It had it on the walls. It had rock wool in the walls. It had thick cement walls on the outside. It was fun, but then I got bored of it because it became work. I was like, why am I working? I'm turning the thing I love into work, and it became very boring very fast. So even though I can get like the recording chain was so good, I could back up like all the way back here. And this would be like the normal distance from my mic because my mic was just so, it could pick up so much stuff. I could literally back up to like here and it would sound like I'm right up on the mic. So the mic was, pristine. So my sonics and the beats and everything had a little bit more sonic movement to it. But it's like, can I not get that if I just sat here and mix for a while, just really listen for more than 30 minutes? Now, the benefit of outboard gear is that you get straight to the result right away. It's like the cheat code. It's like you don't need to learn all these plug-in tricks. You just turn stuff on and it just sounds the way it sounds and it sounds good. So that is one benefit of hardware. The downsides of hardware, the cost. Anytime somebody says like, you're investing in yourself when you buy hardware, you're buying it because it's going to be limited time and all this type of stuff. Well, think about two things. One is who said there's going to be a market in the future for this thing? And two is who said that this is an investment that actually is profitable? Let's say I buy, I don't know, I have a Moog in the closet, which I rarely use because I'm just like, I have to find a place to actually use it. But the Moog Voyager, I think it was like a $4,000 keyboard. So I spent $4,000 years ago. Let me look at the price now. So it looks like the Moog, at the low end is going for like 3. So I'd actually be losing money. This one goes for 2.7. So I'm actually losing money because everybody's trying to fire sale because they need cash, they need liquidity. So the prices are going down. This one is a module. Okay, it's not the whole thing, but still, people are selling this for way less than what I bought it for. And I bought it at pretty much a prime time. So when people tell you, oh, it's just going to go up in value, just buy it and hold it as if it's like some stock or gold or something. Like really ask yourselves, who's going to want this in the future, for one? And for two, how are you going to sell it for more than what you bought it for? Who's going to be dumb enough to buy something like this for 50% more than what you bought it or 100% more than what you bought it for? Like people aren't dumb, that it's just not that easy to, liquidate a Moog Voyager or any type of synth like that. Another thing people don't think about is when you guys buy hardware, you're actually, one, if you turn it on, you're burning your power. So that's going to cost you over the years. And two, depending on like what unit it is and how much heat it generates, you're going to have to run AC. So let's say you're like my preamp, for example, an Avalon, thank goodness, the tubes are still good on here. And the thing about it is it heats up the room so fast, which means I got to go to the AC unit, turn it down, which means now I'm consuming more power. So even though the Avalon may gain $1,000 value in a matter of 10 years or so, I spent $2,000 in air conditioning fees just to keep the room cool. So it's like, if we really sat down and did the math, I doubt anybody in this room, like 99.999% of anybody watching this video, would ever become profitable by sitting and holding outboard gear. It's just not a business plan. And let's be honest, most people don't need to actually buy gear because the people who should be buying gear are the people with commercial studios. Okay, if you don't have a commercial studio and you're thinking about gear, like outboard gear specifically, like processors, stuff like that, I honestly think you're working backwards because, in my opinion, the people who could afford this type of stuff, they're coming from broadcasting, they're coming from film, they're coming from TV, where they have hundreds of thousands of dollars per episode made. Of course, they're going to buy a $5,000 compressor because that's only pennies compared to what they make per episode. So if you're trying to monetize it, ask yourself, can you monetize this thing right away? I made the mistake when I was younger. I got excited about hardware. I bought all this hardware, like Prophet 08, Prophet 6. I don't know when I got the Prophet 6, but the Prophet 08, Prophet 6. I bought the Yamaha Motif. I bought the Roland FA08. I bought the, the Moog Voyager. I bought the Talk Box. I bought all this stuff. And I didn't 100% understand how to use it all in terms of how to get the most value out of it. Not saying I didn't know sound design, because I did, but I didn't know everything about everything at that time. And so I invested in a lot of stuff that never got used. It sat for years, like years before I could even use it. Now, the time I could use it, I got excited because I'm plugging up my synths into my universal audio interface and I'm like getting excited because I'm like, wow, I could finally put this thing to use. And like I said, if I sat down to do the actual calculations, the question I would have to ask myself is, did this Moog Voyager truly make me $4,000 back? I don't know. Like, I doubt I've made that many samples to where I flipped the samples that I sound designed and made $4,000. If it was in a song, I don't even know the last time I've used it in a song. So it's like, what is it for? Is it for show? So I can tell you guys, a lot of the stuff in commercial studios was for show. They told me. They're like, the reason we have this huge console here is because mostly for show, yeah, for sound, but everything's going into Pro Tools anyway. Okay, so the plaques on the wall for show. A lot of that stuff is for show. It's to justify the cost for the session in that specific room in the studio. So will studio owners ever tell you that? No. But that's honestly a lot of the reason why a lot of people buy all this decorative stuff is to say, oh, I have one of the elite microphones. That's why the session is $200 an hour. Okay. Now microphones, if you are in a city that people record in and you have an active demand in your city, I can see where a recording studio would make sense. Where you have a microphone, a Neumann, you might buy a Neumann for used at 2,000 or something like this and get a simple preamp, run it into a UA Apollo, and now you have basically a recording studio, as long as you get it acoustically treated. I've been in basic recording studios, like they don't need to be super fancy. And so you could flip the money faster, I think, with recording than you can with outboard gear for mixing and producer gears like synthesizers and all this. Like if you're not taking it on the road on tour, like really ask the question, how are you making money off the gear that you buy? I can be honest with you guys, because I spent a lot of money on this stuff. Moog Voyager, rarely used it. I think I used it for like 3 videos, maybe a song. I doubt I've used it in a song yet. I haven't used it to sound design yet, at least. It's just chilling. Like I'm negative on that one. What else is in my closet? The Roland FA08. I bought it before Tyler, the creator, started using it years ago. But, the sounds in there ended up being in a Xenology. So I was like, man, I bought this keyboard and now they just put all the sounds inside of Xenology, which is a plugin. So why did I buy the keyboard? Like, what else is in that closet? I can't even think. A Motif X8, same deal. It's like the sounds are now in a plugin somewhere. So it's like, at least for the workstation keyboards and the samplers, it's like, why even buy those keyboards when everything's in plugin form? Now, in terms of, like I said, outboard gear, compressors, stuff like that, think of it this way. If I can go to a company like Analog X that sampled pretty much the most popular settings on the compressor, I literally have a mentor. His name is Rondi Silvestro. Shout out to him. He taught me how to record in a real studio because he's in front of all types of consoles from, I forgot the one they had at the, I want to say API console and a Neve console. I'm forgetting the exact consoles. But he's run a lot of rock bands through his stuff. And he basically showed me one of his 1176s that was a Blueface, the Rev A. And he's like, there was a line on there from the past engineer that said, put it here. Another line on the release that said, put it here. They never touched the settings ever. Like that was his secret sauce. He flipped it on. That was the sauce. Now he's a drummer at heart, so he knows how to get the right tones. So all he's worried about is this tone and vibe. As long as he turns it on, it gives a vibe. That's it. It's all he needs. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when you don't have outboard gear and when you don't have gear in general, you don't understand how simple it is. Like most gear. Now, and here's another, man, so many points against gear. I'll kind of sum it up in these last 2 points. Is you don't understand how simple it is. You're really probably never going to touch your gear ever. Like maybe a couple things here and there, maybe, but you're rarely touching the gear. That's why I love the SSL, because it gave me a reason to touch it per song, like the stereo width. I want more saturation. It was a reason to touch the settings. My EQ, I barely needed to touch that. My compressor, rarely touched. I mean, I did touch that, but the Neve tape emulators, like, did I need to really? I mean, there's different silk modes on it, yeah, but it's not as deep as plugins, but it gives you a better, like, radio ready sound right away. And here's another thing about gear that I just thought about, is not only the cost per thing. Like, you guys don't understand because we're so used to plugins. To do what we do in a DAW with plugins would cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Okay. And it's just not sustainable for the average person. Even if you have a really good, successful commercial studio, it's not sustainable for like 90% of people to have all this stuff, like, at all. That's why people, they delegate their work over to another mastering studio and delegate their stuff over to another mixing studio, because when you dive into one specific thing about music, like recording, chances are you probably don't have the best mixing outboard gear. Chances are. But if you focus on mixing, do you have the best recording stuff? Chances are you don't. If you focus on mastering, do you have the best mixing stuff and best recording stuff? Chances are you don't. So when it costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to create a studio, you can't have everything, just by the nature of business. And one thing that really, really, really nobody told me about is it's like, okay, I had my little 500 series rack. I had the SSL, I had the Drummer EQ, I had the Zulu, I had the, what else do we have on that thing, man? I feel like I'm missing something in that chain. Pretty much that was it for the most part. I know I'm missing something though. And, but my point is we had all this stuff, but I can only run a stereo signal through it. What if I needed a compressor on the snare? Now I don't have two of the compressors. So like I could either do the stereo compressor or I would have to buy 2 units per channel per thing. Like when you start mixing individual tracks, like a drum bus or mixing vocals separately, because you're not going to mix the vocals the same way you would mix your mixed bus. So when it comes to gear, you have to literally think in groups. So it's like, okay, mixed bus gear, then you have vocal gear, then you have drum gear, then you have, instrument gear, whatever that would be. Okay. So like I said, the price gets steep fast when you need stereo. And it's just, like I said, unless you're taking out, a loan from some kind of king of a country, this stuff is just not, yes, it can give you a better sound, but we have to be honest with ourselves. The music industry has changed. Money's not just flowing like crazy through film into the pockets where we're getting these crazy budgets. So who is going to, and let me ask this question. Who even owned the gear that people revel about? Like who actually owned it? Did Sony own it? Did Universal own it? Or did a person at home own it? So when we hear these talking heads talking about you guys should focus on gear and the quality of sound and all this stuff, who owned the actual gear that most people were using back in the day? I can tell you Kanye probably wasn't using, the stuff that Ken Lewis owned, okay? Ken Lewis owned that stuff. Kanye just sent his stuff through Ken Lewis and even Irko, for example, when he mixed Donda. So it's like, do we really need to own this stuff or do we just need to run our stuff through analog gear, period? Because there's websites for that too. If you guys truly want to run your stuff through analog gear, Aria Mastering runs their stuff through analog. I forget there's another company that lets you pick the analog piece that you actually want to run something through. So why do you need to have analog stuff in your actual studio unless it's for recording? I honestly don't understand the purpose unless, again, like I said, you're commercialized and you have a lot of clients and you're doing all that. Most people don't. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't aspire to have outboard gear and a bunch of gear, but like I want you guys to take the fantasy of gear away because you don't understand the downside of gear, which is it's extremely expensive. It's very warm, which means you're going to have to pay for a lot of utilities. You need a place to put this stuff. You need all the equipment to even hold the stuff. Okay. And again, if you don't have a business that can, quickly monetize to suffice for that counterbalance, it really doesn't make sense for anybody. It's not sustainable. So like I said, I showed you guys the websites where you guys can actually get the analog sound and do your investigations. I want you guys to understand how powerful plugins are. I have over 2,000 plugins. I've heard a lot of what plugins can do. I'm not saying they're perfectly matched with analog. I'm just saying that you can get a lot further than you think with what you have already. So that's the last bit I'll say here. Thank you guys for listening. It's Game from BusyWorksBeats.com. Peace out, guys.